Sometimes in life you can do everything right and still lose. You can make mistakes and win occasionally short term, but the whole idea is like making the right decision.
I'm okay with mistakes. Mistakes, as long as you learn from them, and as long as you don't repeat them.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Badass Life podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrew Abad. I'm your host. And this podcast is all about bringing you experts or people who are becoming experts on their field to give you the tips, tricks, and hacks that you need to start crafting your own badass life. Today, we have a very special episode because with us, we have someone that is an amazing person. I've known him for several years. I actually worked with him at one point, and he was one of my favorite people to work with. And so he's a great entrepreneur, he's a great family man, great dad, and he, in my opinion, is living his own badass life. So thank you for making the time to be in here today, John.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. So just a little bit of what we want to talk about today is just going to be a bit of like, that entrepreneurial aspect of things, running your own business, all the adversity that we go through as entrepreneurs. But before we go into all of that, just tell us, for the audience to get to know you a little bit, who is John? How did you end up on the career and the field and the industry that you are now?
Well, so my path into construction actually started when I was 11 years old. It's when I first came across a set of blueprints for a house, and so I was just absolutely enthralled with everything that kind of was conveyed on the blueprints, and so it just really caught my imagination. And it just so happened that growing up, my best friend's dad was a contractor, and so my first job was digging foundation footers when I was 11 years old in South Florida, because we didn't have the many excavators that came and and dug the dirt that dig the footers. We would hand shovel them, and so that was actually my first job. Growing up.
Oh wow, so it's been a long time now. 11 years.
It has been
11
a long
years
time.
old.
So yeah. So from there, in high school, I took drafting classes. Just again, just was absolutely kind of enthralled with it, and it just really caught my attention. And from there, I went to University of Florida, studied architecture, and then after UF, moved back down to South Florida, and then got a job with a track builder down there, and that's kind of where I started my professional construction career.
Oh wow, nice! I didn't know that you lived in South Florida. That's before you established here in Ocala.
Yeah. So actually, I was born in Fort Lauderdale, but I grew up in Boca Raton. I am not wealthy, but my family grew up during the 70s and 80s down in Boca Raton. Actually, the Town Center Mall, before that was built, that's where I used to build forts and hunt rabbits.
Wow.
And now it's it's this huge mall on Glades Road down in Boca Raton, and those are my little stomping grounds.
Wow. It's funny when you said that you started at such an early age, like 11 years old, and you said that you started by digging the footings, right? You brought me back 15 years ago. It's when I first moved to the States, I used to work in power washing. So I worked with my uncle. This company was called Fleet Wash. And I had a friend that he used to work in construction. And he would tell me because the fleet washing was tough, especially during the winter time in New York, the water would freeze. I wasn't used to that kind of work. It was literally my first job. It was 17 years old. And I would always say this is really tough. And he was construction is tough. And I was no, there's no way. I was I was young and full of energy. So one weekend he took me to work with him, and that's all we did all day. It was dig the footings. And by the end of the day, I was the middle of my hands were just completely raw. It was I was that was my construction experience, and that was the only time I worked it.
Yeah, well, and unless you become a skilled laborer,
correct?
But if you're a general laborer, that's typically what it's cleaning up, it's digging, it's moving things around, making way for the skilled labor to do their jobs.
Yeah, to come in and do. Yeah, for sure. So how did that progress for you? And and that's one of the things that I wanted to touch on was that you can tell that this is something that you love and something that you have a passion for. And that's what I tell a lot of people that I work with. There's a lot of the times when you actually are lucky enough to find and are able to do the one thing that you have aptitudes for, and then you have that passion, that burning desire that makes it just fulfills you and makes you happy.
Yep.
It shows, right? You're able to find like the enjoyment in what you're doing, because that's one of the things that I always admire from you when we worked together back in the day. Was like you're one of the most like cool, calm, and collected people that I've met, and you always carry yourself in that way, and you're always enjoying the moment, whatever it is that you do. And so, is that something that you've learned that is just because you enjoyed this area of like or this industry, or is that something that you apply for everything?
Well, that's kind of a way I live my life.
Mhm.
There's so many things through the course of a day, a week, a month, a year that can not go your way.
Mhm.
And if you're always getting upset or angry, it's kind of a self-defeating kind of mindset in that you're constantly being angry and worrying about what already happened. What I like to do is I like to be proactive. I like to think things through before I do them. And then, if something doesn't go, the right way, then, it's now you kind of kick into problem solving mode. Okay, what is the best way to solve this problem? Getting mad at it's not going to help anybody.
It's not going to solve the problem,
That's right.
correct? And especially in your profession, whenever, like, for example, a mistake happens, they
Mhm.
tend to be big mistakes, right? Isn't that something that you could,
Well, I
like,
mean, it's relative. Some
yeah.
some are big, some are,
Hmm.
but that's the whole point of being proactive is to
Hmm.
avoid the big mistakes. But when they happen, sometimes you have to kind of back up, retrace your steps. Sometimes you have to redo things in order to make them right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, and that's like I said, that's one of the things that I've always admired from you. And it's just like that ability to like be able to carry yourself a certain way and even perform per se when things are not going well, right? Because
Mhm.
that's the key. It's like everybody can be like cool, calm, and collected when things are going great, but
Mhm.
when there are those mistakes, when something happens, is when you truly see like the character of people, and that's always been great. I used to love working with you. Like you're my
Well,
favorite
thank you.
supervisor.
I do appreciate that.
So talk to us a little bit more about Stanchek. When was it born? Uh, how did it come to life? How long has it been?
So I originally got my contractor's license in 2006, and as you and everyone else is aware, 2007, the housing market crash and everything like that. So um, I was able to, under my license when I first got it, I was able to do a renovation addition in Gainesville and a
Mhm.
bathroom remodel in Ocala before the market basically crashed. After that. There was no work. A lot of companies, went out of business and everything like that. And so um, I, kind of seeing the writing on the wall, knew that, I had to find something else to do. And so that's what I did. And I kind of, found my way until about 2011, 2012, when things started to come back. And so what I did was I started to work for other contractors. Even though I still had my license, I would, work for contractors, get experience, in the area especially. And then, when the time came in 2022, I went back out on my own. And so I established Stanchek Design Build. Because of my architectural background, I felt that I could provide design services to facilitate building. Some people come to me with their plans already drawn. That's completely fine. I can build those as well. But if someone comes to me with a concept or with something that they jotted down, or even just a program of how many bedrooms and how many bathrooms they want, we can start establishing what is a good solution for them residentially. And so from that we can go through the design process, and then once the design is established and the plans are completed, then we can move on to construction phase.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I just to touch on the first thing when you said about, like the housing crash in
Hmm.
'08. That's when I moved to the States.
Hmm.
Like I remember vividly 2008. I think I came in April,
Hmm.
and my sister back in the day used to have like a very successful business. They used to do appraisals,
Hmm.
and they were like in real estate.
Yeah.
So they did hundreds and hundreds of appraisals per month, and that was like a good portion of their income.
Hmm.
And then next thing you know, the bank that will give them all these appraisals went underwater. They lost pretty much like 90% of their income, and
Yeah.
things started going sideways for a lot of people back then.
Yeah. Yeah, I originally moved up to Ocala in, I think it was 2003. My mom had just passed away, and my dad lived up here. He lived out in Anthony. And so I moved up here to be closer to my dad after that happened. And, and so originally went to work for 84 Lumber doing material sales. And then, in 2006, I was able to convert that into my license and move on into construction, which again was very short lived considering
The
the housing
timing.
market crash. Yeah. So
That was gonna be my next question. It was like, what made you move to Ocala? But
yeah.
you just answered that before I asked you.
Yeah. So yeah, in 2003, my mom was in a car accident
I'm
and
sorry.
unfortunately, thank you, unfortunately passed away. And then my dad was up here, by
Mhm.
himself, and so we moved up to, up to Ocala to be closer to him, spend time with him, and kind of support him. And it was actually, I think it was a really good move. South Florida is, I mean, it's where I grew up and everything like that, but over time places change,
Yeah.
and so it was definitely changing. And I-95 was now 12 lanes, and it wasn't the place I grew up in anymore. So Ocala provided a kind of a slower, kind of more thoughtful life, and so it was a welcome change of scenery, and happy to be here.
Yeah, no, me too. I always have like great things to say about Ocala because I when I first moved to the states, I actually was here briefly in Florida. 'Cause my sister used to live here. She lives still in Orlando,
Right.
and I came here. But then I was very young. I was 17, and there was like the transportation. I didn't have a license yet, so I like in like a month and a half, I was like, I'm going to New York. So I ended up moving to New York and then started working with my uncle doing the fleet
Right.
washing and stuff. And so I lived there and I lived in the city. So I got the experience of
Oh
like big
wow.
city, all the stuff, moved to Long Island. And then I moved back to Orlando after like 8 years or whatnot. And that was already a change because, from Manhattan to Orlando,
Yeah.
much smaller city. And then from Orlando, moved to closer to the villages,
Hmm.
Summerfield.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of like when, I ended up meeting Jen and then
Hmm.
establishing in Ocala. And then I'm so happy that it's here because although like Ocala is growing a lot now, there's
Hmm.
a lot of progress, a lot of development, uh, a lot of growth happening.
There is.
Um, Now I will start seeing the traffic. Like traffic was one of the things that will like tilt me, like we said in the poker world, so
Hmm.
much in Orlando, and I kind of like was running away from that, and now we're running into some of the same issues here. But hopefully, uh, the county commissioners and Ben and the mayor and the people here start looking into that to like really take in consideration the infrastructure of the city
Hmm.
because like this growth is like I don't think it's going to be able to be sustainable if we're not very thoughtful about that.
Right. And it's not, but you have several large companies, Amazon, Chewy's,
Mhm.
AutoZone, establishing, huge distribution warehouses here. I mean, we're thankfully we have jobs, but then those jobs have to be linked to people. People have to have a place to live. They have to have a car. They have to get to work.
Yeah.
They have to go out to dinner. They have to spend time with their families. So congestion is kind of a part of it. I found that the county planning department, they do have kind of zoning and planning in place, but sometimes unexpectedly growth grows faster than your plan. And so I know they're kind of taking that into consideration, and they're trying to kind of keep up with the explosive growth that we're experiencing.
Yeah, you go into like forums and stuff, and a lot of
Yeah.
people
Oh
are
yeah.
complaining and stuff. But a lot of the times, it's really easy to complain. It's really easy to be part of the problem,
Right.
as opposed to like get in those people's shoes and trying
Right.
to be part of the solution, right? Like managing a town, a city, a country, it's like
Right.
managing a business. And sometimes it's not the easiest. Like we
Right.
have to like learn by trial and error. We have to,
Hmm.
like sometimes things don't work like the first time.
Yep.
And that's like a good segue for like what I was gonna ask you next was like having the experience of being in your field for all this time,
Hmm.
but like having to go into looking for a different alternative because of the market conditions back
Hmm.
then. What is something that you've learned throughout all this, past almost 20 years, that it resonates with you now that you have your own practice, that you have your company when you're on again? What are some of those like key things that you've learned, and some of the like the biggest constraints that you found in going back into the entrepreneurial life?
Well, I think you kind of hit on it earlier. As far as kind of, it's easy to complain about whether it's traffic or your situation.
Mhm.
It's easy to kind of take that kind of negative attitude. I think. But getting back to being proactive, like we talked about the congestion. So there are several ways to get to a point.
Mhm.
If you want to go that, you don't have to go on 200. You don't have to go on 75. There's other ways to get there. So, take the time to explore those alternate routes to get to where you need to go. And you'll find that, not only will you get there faster, but, less congestion. If you're someone that, is susceptible to road rage, then,
Mm.
less rage. And so, so there's always a different way to do things. And so, by kind of trying to kind of live that way of thinking, you kind of find your own way. And getting back to, so many people are kind of stuck in their situations because they're only complaining about it. They're not thinking of solutions, or they're not working towards a solution. So if you're constantly kind of thinking ahead and also trying to better your situation, or kind of find solutions to the problems you're finding in your life, then I feel that kind of mindset will kind of lead you to success,
Mhm.
because you're going to kind of find different ways to get to where you want to be, rather than kind of just sticking where you're at and complaining about it.
So yeah, I'm the same proponent on the fact that like mindset is like 90% of the battle, right? Like
Hmm.
the problem generally is not the problem, it's how you react to the
Correct.
problem is the problem. And so like that being said, and knowing that ever since I've known you, you've done a great job by like now reacting to the problems like
Right.
that. Are there any like industry specific problems that you think a lot of like new people in your industry that are trying to go on their own, that
Hmm.
are contractors, that they get bogged down with? Or like what would be a suggestion that you would give someone that is trying to start into the construction industry?
Well, I feel like a lot of people in construction, or business owners, especially starting out, they feel like every job that comes their way, they have to take. And
Mhm.
so, and there is some truth to that, because, you have to pay, you have, bills to
Yeah.
pay, you have the things you want to do in your life. But once you kind of just begin to establish yourself, I would say, it's important to interview your clients just as much as
Mhm.
they're interviewing you, because you'll find that your gut is a good kind of indicator of how a job's going to go. Not always, but for the most part, if you get a feeling like someone, like a client, is kind of overbearing, or is telling you how the job needs to go, I mean, ultimately it's your responsibility to complete the job, and you want to be in sync with your client. But you also want to kind of allow them to kind of lean on your expertise. So I find that, as a business owner, you really need to kind of focus on what you're doing, the best way to do it, and providing the best service to your clients, rather than, kind of getting caught up in the kind of power dynamic with your clients. Ultimately, you need to establish early on, that level of trust and expertise, that they can trust you moving forward, and allow you to do your job.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more with the part that you mentioned about qualifying your clients and your
Mhm.
customers and making sure that, it's a good fit before you just go ahead
Right.
and render your services or your product, right? Like, one of the things that I say to people that I work with is like, if you're a startup or if you're like a mid-market company,
Mm.
if let's say that if you're a startup, if you're starting out your entrepreneurial career, you're in like survival mode. You
Mhm.
have to pay the bills. You have to be
Of
realistic.
course.
Everybody likes to get romanticized, like everything they see on social media is like, oh, you have stop trading your time for money and all this stuff. And it's
Right.
like there's levels to this stuff. Like at
Yes.
first you have to put your time in. But as long as you are completing like what you require for your survival, like your family has a roof
Mhm.
over their heads, like you have food, you have like your basic needs,
Mhm.
then you really have to like, okay, start really picking and choosing who you're going to work with.
Mhm.
Because if you start just working with people that are going to drive you crazy just to get the extra money so
Mhm.
you can go out and do the things that don't necessarily bring you any like net positives in your life,
Mhm.
like getting the fancy cars or getting like the extra,
Mhm.
like the things that are not needed, the
Right.
things that most of us like end up, like for example, I'm a car guy,
Mhm.
right? I really like cars.
Yeah, I
I don't get
know.
them because like I'm trying to impress anybody. I'm
Right.
just like legitimately like them and I
Yeah.
like to go fast. But a lot of people like end up wanting that for status and all
Mhm.
stuff. And that just like takes away so much of your peace of mind, because now what you're doing is like you're putting yourself in a hole that you have to fill
Right.
by having customers that you potentially don't want to work with. It takes away your peace of mind. It takes away like the enjoyment out
Mhm.
of like, of your career. And this happens in like every industry. It's not
Yeah.
just in the construction industry. So that's the thing, is just be intentional with the people that you want to work with, because it's going to create either a very pleasurable experience
Mhm.
or live in hell, to put it that way. And you don't want to make that trade off of having to not enjoy your job simply to have extra to go and do something that you don't really need or want deep
Right,
down,
right.
right?
Well, your example, I mean, you're working to impress other people.
Hmm.
I mean, me personally, I work for my family.
Correct.
I want to provide for my family. I want, rather than stuff, I mean, honestly, I want experiences. I
Hmm.
want to take trips with my family. I want to experience, the Grand Canyon. We just went to Toronto the week after Christmas this year. Did a little ski trip. So I mean, that's what I work for. I work
Yeah.
for those experiences to spend with my family. And I find that, as you mature over time, your priorities change. In your 20s, you're looking for a mate or you're looking for a partner. So
Hmm.
you're, kind of,
Tend to be more flashy, more a
right.
little bit.
You're,
Yeah.
peacocking and,
Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
to
Yeah. For
show
sure.
off and everything. But once you find that partner, Jen for you, Suzanne for
Hmm.
me, I mean, once you find that partner, that is your ride or die, or, always has your back, you're living for a different purpose, and so, you go into business to provide, good experiences for people, and then, ultimately, those good experiences turn into financial gain for you, and that
Hmm.
financial gain turns into experiences and simple pleasures for your family.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Like one of the concepts of this podcast, right, is like what I try to live my life by is like four like very simple concepts of like health, wealth, relationships,
Yep.
and purpose and business. I'm sorry, and purpose, and not necessarily in that order, right? Like
Right.
I believe that health is like really really important.
Of
Without
course.
health, you don't have any of the other
Right.
ones. Um, Wealth, like building wealth, is something that I think we all want. It's not necessarily like for the love of the money in itself. Money is
Right.
just a tool. That's we want that to do all the things that you just mentioned, right? To
But
have the
wealth is not
freedom.
only money.
Correct, correct. It's
Mhm.
like, but that's what the most common
Correct.
ones that people look at when they hear
Right.
wealth. But yeah, like correct is like a variety forms of
Yeah.
wealth, right? And so start building that to create that freedom for our
Mhm.
families, for ourselves, that choice of like, okay, we have our own business, maybe we are not no longer on the startup phase, and now
Mhm.
we get to enjoy some of the freedoms, whereas one day we wake up, we want to take our significant other on a date during the day or go
Mhm.
to the beach and do whatever. I think those are the residuals of like putting in that hard work at first,
Of
because
course.
we all go through those stages,
Right.
right? And so relationships for me are extremely important, right? I tell everybody, money is just a tool. Relationships will make or break your life and the
Hmm.
experience that you have on this earth, right?
Hmm.
I tell my team, like, it doesn't matter. Like, we are conditioned to believe that money is valuable just because the society that we live in. But if like the zombie apocalypse comes tomorrow, or like a post-apocalyptic thing happens,
Right.
what's gonna like be more useful for you, like
Right.
having those strong relationships and people that care about you, that will have your back, that watch out for the zombies for you,
Right.
or having a bunch of little pieces of paper that are green and have like dead presidents on,
Right.
right? So it's like those are some of the things, and then obviously your purpose is the thing that fills you up, that fills
Hmm.
your cup, that makes you wake up in the morning motivated and happy. And it's like, I get to go to the office
Yep.
and make someone's dream house happen. I
Hmm.
get to help them finding or creating their beautiful space that they're gonna enjoy their life in,
Yep.
all those things. So yeah, absolutely with you on that. um I wanted to touch into, and just to go into, like, I don't want to call it like a negative aspect of it,
Okay.
but all industries have it, and like there is this like stigma of like sometimes people, when we were talking offset about
Hmm.
like dealing with contractors and all that
Right.
stuff, right? And so like, what would you say it's like the most efficient way to find the right contractor, or like what are some like cool tips for people out there needing that service, for them to study, or like just like find the right guy for the job?
Well, I think, like with anything, you need to do your homework.
Hmm.
I mean, and you need to research. You need to check into them, make sure they're licensed, make sure they're insured. I would say, check their testimonials, or their reviews, but also meet with them. I would say think of questions, think of thoughtful questions, like how you see your job going, or what you want your job to go. And like I said before, I mean, you need to interview your contractor, but if your contractor is a good one, he's asking questions back. He's not just answering questions, he's asking questions. And that's when you know that you have someone that's interested in your project. They're interested in building for you. They're not just kind of listening to you to get a contract to build a house. And so there are different kind of areas of construction that always come up. Nobody ever wants to talk about the B word, budget.
Hmm.
Whenever I talk to someone, it's like they don't want to talk about a budget at first. Well, that's the easiest way to determine if a contractor is a good fit for you. Because if for example, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to someone, and they tell me all this stuff. They want 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, and they have a budget. They don't tell me this, but they're like, "Can you do it for under 175,000?" And I'm like, I
Yeah,
can't. I
it's
mean,
gonna be, yeah,
you
especially
know,
in this economy, in this market.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so during COVID, I mean, building materials shot up, and I mean, things shot up as much as 30 to 50%. A lot of those materials are still up; they've never come down. Concrete, for example, continues to rise at a rate of 3% twice a year.
Wow.
Wood is a commodity, so wood fluctuates and wood
Hmm.
does come back down. But for the most part, materials are still where they were. Doors, windows are still kind of where they're at, where they were during COVID. And I said, so it's hard. I mean, right
Yeah.
now, the average price for a home in the United States is $419,000, according to the National Home Builders Association.
That
That's a lot.
Right.
You
That's the
know,
average
that's the
nationwide?
nationwide. That is the average home price is
Oh,
four hundred
wow.
nineteen thousand.
I thought it was like on the high twos.
Locally, it might be,
Okay,
but on a
but just
national
national.
average, 419,000
Oh,
is
wow.
your average house. And don't get me wrong, there are people that are building multi-million-dollar houses, and there are
Hmm.
people that are building houses for 250,000, 225,000. So, but the national average is 419,000.
Based on your opinion and your expertise on the industry, I have no idea why like material costs and all
Hmm.
that stuff. Like, why have those prices stay there instead of coming right back down? Like, I
Right.
completely understand when there's like supply chain issues and like when
Correct.
when the world was upside down during COVID and like certain things just went crazy. But like, why have some of those prices haven't come back down?
Well, construction remained constant or grew during COVID.
Hmm.
So it was a little bit of a, we had a little bit of a rush there. And so people were building, and so there was no need. The market wasn't correcting itself. For
Hmm.
example, building, starts didn't fall off. So, when construction starts to fall off, then materials kind of come back down. With a lumber, from what I understand, there, they thought they thought demand was going to diminish
Hmm.
with COVID, and so they shut down several mills, and then when demand shot up, then they kind of
Yeah.
got caught with their pants down, and so that's why. And so basically, people were scrambling to get what lumber was available, and were willing to pay a higher premium for it, and so that's why the lumber prices shot up so well. I mean, right now studs are, 3 and change, depending on, 8 foot, 10 foot,
Hmm.
8 foot, 9 foot, 10 foot pre-cut. And I say they start, so the 8 footer will start at like, I don't know, 368 right now. Obviously a 9 footer is going to be a little bit more, and a 10 footer will be a little bit more than that. But during COVID, I mean, we were paying as much as $16 a stud.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's a huge difference.
So like demand is basically one of like the highest factors as to why these materials have stayed,
Well,
you know
supply
that.
and demand, because if demand is
Okay,
high and
correct.
supply is high,
Yes.
then prices are going to
Yeah,
be
stabilized, but
right. So, it was just one of those things where, like I said, they were anticipating, and that didn't happen. That was just lumber. That didn't
mhm.
happen for other, concrete. There was a Portland shortage, so Portland cement shortage. So that's what kind of contributed to. So it was kind of a perfect storm of a bunch of industries not being prepared
Yeah,
and demand shooting up.
right.
And so, which it happens.
I remember specifically meeting with you in like the parking lot of this strip mall, like around Baseline, a
Hmm.
few years ago when I was thinking about building the house. It was right during COVID,
Hmm.
right? And I had an idea of like roughly how much it was gonna cost based on
Right.
my limited knowledge on all
Right.
of everything that it entails. And then when I just gave you the plans and you told me that how much the price was going to be, I was like, oh my god, this is like
Right.
2.5x what I thought it would be, or like 2x what I
Right.
thought it would be. And I remember that, yeah, we ended up finding the land. We had the land, but and we wanted to build, and then like not only that the prices like skyrocketed, it was also everybody was so backed up that it was like, okay, well, it's going to be like 2 years
Right.
before we can, before
Right.
it'll be ready, or 2.5 years before it'll be ready. So we were like,
Right.
oh, that's not an option. So
Yeah.
we had to go and get something.
And price is, is a main kind of, pain point, because a lot
Hmm.
of people, like, especially if they previously built a house, like I recently spoke with someone and they built a house 10 years ago, and so they have an idea, or they think that that price level is
Yeah.
still around, and it's not.
And I was
And
like,
so,
yeah,
kind of trying to have to break that news to them, or not even convince, but just tell them like, that was 10 years
it,
ago. Things have changed. The other thing is, I get calls all the time, people asking me what my square footage price is.
hmm
And so the thing is every house is different.
hmm
If you have a house and it just, it doesn't have, you have a little bit of a front porch and no back patio, then, you have a lot of kind of conditioned space. And then there's houses that have like wraparound porches and, all
hmm
these outdoor covered spaces and stuff like that. And so, apples to apples is very difficult in that square footage price situation. So I kind of have like ballpark numbers, like for conditioned space and for exterior spaces, that I can kind
hmm
of put you into a kind of a ballpark.
yeah,
And
set
then,
some expectations, but
yeah,
it's not going to be dead on.
right. And then you have, what I call level of luxury, like,
Hmm.
do you want, LVP flooring? Do you want
Hmm.
imported Italian tile? Do you
Yeah.
want a tile backsplash? Do you want drywall backsplash? So there's all these other things that factor into it that can drive the square footage price up. And then on top of that, as if that wasn't complicated enough, there are contractors in an effort, and I'm not saying they're doing it purposely, but some people, you call them and they'll give you a square footage price, but what they're doing is they're using the total square footage to make that price seem smaller. And so in that person's eyes, they're they're affordable. But if it used to be that square footage price was based on conditioned space. But now there's people out there that are giving you a total square footage number, so their number looks smaller, and so people think that they're more affordable when the cost of the house is still.
If you're an expert on any field or a successful entrepreneur who wants to be featured in our podcast,
I loved it.
Make sure you click the link below, fill out the application, tell us a little bit about yourself. If we're a good fit, somebody from our team will reach out to you.
What's up? What's up? Hey, what's up? What's up?
And you need to get ready to start inspiring our audience and become a part of the A Badass Life podcast. I'll see you soon.
Going to be what it would cost to go with, 2 or 3 of the other 5 contractors you considered.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to know as an end user, right? Because we were talking about that offset. Sometimes we don't know what to look for, right? We don't know. We as end users, I know a lot of stuff about marketing, about poker, about some investments, about things that I'm used to and they're in my world, right? But I don't know the first thing about what to look for when I'm trying to build a house.
Right.
So that is a good tip for people to ask, right? It's it's okay, is it condition or is total square footage? That way they have a better understanding of who to go with or what the prices really look like.
Right.
Because there's a lot of people out there that will do and will have their little strategies that could be could look a little sneaky or whatever. Right. But you just want to, as the end user, you just want to have all of the information available to make the right decision.
Right. Well, I think you also want to kind of, you want to find someone that you feel is trying to build trust with you, trust and transparency. Communication is another big part of keeping that relationship good throughout the build. If a builder doesn't communicate with you and you're left in the dark, then, people, tend to kind of think the worst, what's going on, and so, I think, our job as contractors, in order to kind of provide people with with what I'm trying to do, which is, provide 5-star experiences. When I do an estimate, I do a line item estimate, and so I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm not giving you a big number and saying it's all inclusive. I'm willing to discuss, go through the estimate and kind of discuss it with you. And, and explain to you why things are a certain way, because I'm trying to build trust. I want you to understand that, even though I'm a builder and I do this for money, I am an advocate for you, trying to provide you with what you are looking to build.
Correct. And that's how it should be. It should feel like you're in their team, not against them,
It should. And that's why, right now, because the not the industry, but because the economy is kind of, there's some uncertainty, especially, with tariffs and stuff like that. And, the thing is there is uncertainty in material pricing right now. And so it's very difficult to give someone a fixed price. In fact, there's contractors that will not do fixed price right now. They'll do a cost plus. Well, in a cost plus situation, I will show my client how much I make from a job. When I submit, I submit all the invoices, they see everything that's been paid, they can add it up and it equals what the invoice is for. You know what I mean? Plus the markup. But, there's nowhere, there's nowhere that they don't understand how the money works for them.
See, and that's one of the things that I want to touch on that, at least for me, is what I've found to be one of the best ways to just slay those objections or that lack of trust at first when it comes to the B word, when it comes to their budget. Because we have the same issues in marketing, right? Marketing is one of those things too. Just like houses, you can build a house for maybe $250,000 and you can build a house for $10 million. It all really depends on all the variables, right? So we do, and even for myself, like I built my company because I got tired of dealing with marketing agencies, and I knew that I needed to learn about how to market my company and my business correctly, and I needed like a bunch of different experts because I couldn't do it all. Like that's probably the number one mistake we all entrepreneurs do at some point. Like we think that to save money and to to make it work, we have to do everything, and that it's hard to do everything at a high level and be competitive with people that are just focusing on that one thing, right? So that's basically, long story short, that's how Media Mind started. I hired a video editor, then I hired a social media manager, then a web developer, and they were all my in-house marketing team, right? But when it comes to like the budget issues, I had a lot of like marketing agencies that I spoke with at first. That would be like the first question they asked is like, okay, what's your budget, right? And it almost feels like they're just trying to see how much money they can get out of you, right? Or at least when you're not educated on the other side, you don't know why they're asking that. Then it feels like that, right? And some of them just, some of them, like in every industry, some of them use it to their benefit. Some of them like are truly asking to know, like, what can they do for you? But what I was gonna say is like one of the best ways to just slay those or that lack of trust as first is just to establish like complete transparency, like you said, and just educate the people as to like why we need to know, right? For example, a lot of the people that I started to work with me is I tell them, it's like, look, I have a few non-negotiables, and there are some things that like I'm just gonna need to know, right? And the reason for this is like basically I start educating them as to why. Like there are so many variables, there are so many different things. Like what you tell me, I'm not gonna use against you. I'm gonna use it for you. Like I'm gonna know what I can implement, how I can make the budget, whether it's little or huge. Depending on that, how I can allocate that in a way that is going to serve you best, right? And this is the same thing for you for the housing. It's like, okay, what's their budget, how can you the closest that you can get to their vision with the resources that they have, right? And I think like a lot of people don't do a great job explaining that in like a very clear way, and so that people feel like, oh, they're just trying to know how much I can spend, as opposed to like, just being very transparent and be like, look, if you have this much, I can do this for you. If you have this much, it's not a matter of like what we can do. Because sometimes, for example, too, like us in marketing, sometimes a lot of your budget, it doesn't necessarily goes to our fees. It goes to Meta, it goes to Google. Like if we're running paid campaigns, the more money you feed the beast, the more leads you're gonna get. And like it just works. It's a whole ecosystem of different things that work together in different variables. Right, so that in itself is like something very similar, because for whatever reason, people don't like to talk about money.
No, well, and not everybody's the same. Some people don't mind talking about budgets, and some people are very protective of the budget or what they're willing to spend. And so, and every situation is different. I mean, some people you have to kind of establish that trust. You know what I mean, and you have to put a little effort. So a lot of contractors, they're trying to qualify clients or eliminate tire kickers. Well, sometimes you have to waste a little bit of time because it leads you to situations that might end up being really good projects. So it's kind of cost of doing business. It's almost kind of an overhead of your time. Yes. Sometimes you have to kind of spend some time with some people, getting to know them and getting to know what their needs are, because once you establish that trust, then they will open up to you and they will kind of, tell you what they're willing to spend and stuff like that. But you have to show them that you're worthy of them kind of opening up to you, so to speak.
Yeah. And one of the things that I want to touch on that also is like when you mentioned tire kickers, that just brought me back to some people that I've worked with in sales, right? And unless you think like you're the best salesman or best entrepreneur, you can always learn from people. It doesn't matter whether they're labeled tire kickers or they're like your best ideal customer. I believe, this is just my opinion, I don't think nobody is willingly going to go to you to try to waste their time and yours. Like anybody that comes to you, for example, that may not be ready to get the home, but they just want to get a little bit of info. You're like giving up your time to tell them, give them some value so that they have some information. They may not be a buyer now,
Hmm.
but they may very well may be a buyer 2 years from now or a
Right.
year from now. So like and now especially with what we do is like we help those people that are not buyers just yet, for you to continue nurture them, for you to continue giving value, for you to continue giving them tips and tricks and hacks
Right.
as to how to get there, so that eventually they give you their business, right?
Yeah, and and it's not even, well. I mean, yes, it is, but the other thing is even if they don't end up coming to you,
Hmm.
you never know. I mean, they're having a conversation with someone, and they're asking about. He's like, well, hey, I talked to this contractor a while back. He really took his time and spent time with me. I didn't end up building, but it might be a good fit for you,
Right.
and it ends up they're giving you a referral because
Yeah.
you took the time to spend with them. So you didn't kind of make you didn't make anything off of them, but by providing them with a good experience
Hmm.
down the road, it might turn into another job.
And that's how you build like the best possible uh, referrals and
Right.
network and sphere of influence. Is just by spending the time, like knowing that the best shortcut is there's no shortcut. Like you just
Right.
build those relationships and like being relational instead of transactional. That's something I did. Like I take meetings with anybody. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter. Like I know I value my time a lot,
Hmm.
but if I can talk to you, I personally believe I love talking to people, right?
Right.
And I think everybody's interesting. You can learn something from
100%.
everybody, and yeah, I mean, like I'm at that stage now where it's like I want to be more involved in the community. I want to
Hmm.
be more involved more locally, and so like I'm talking to everybody that I can,
Right.
and this podcasting is like one of the best ways to do it for me
Hmm.
because just get to know a little bit more about the people that I'm surrounded with, or the people in the community, and our audience starts learning a little bit more about you guys also.
Hmm.
And I think it's just a win-win. So what is your ideal customer, and where is like your specialty? Is there any type of range when it comes to homes? That you mentioned it was residential, but
Hmm.
who are the people that you've realized like, okay, this profile or this avatar is kind of like my ideal customer?
So I would say my ideal customer, I mean, what I specialize in is semi-custom to custom homes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I try to provide, spaces and homes for families and couples to kind of grow up and experience and have kind of kind of the life's journey, grow up and so I specialize in semi-custom and custom homes. I'm trying to provide kind of well thought out homes for people to kind of experience life through, whether they have families or not. Some people are downsizing. Some people are, looking to expand, through, additions, remodels, whatever. I prefer new construction, but I also do, renovations and remodels, additions. But I think an ideal customer would be someone that has a good understanding of what they want, or what they're looking for, and also someone that does have a budget in mind. Whether they tell me or not, they understand what they're willing to spend on it. Because if we start getting into the numbers and it is high, well, depending on what that kind of variance is, maybe we can value engineer it back to your budget. But if we're $100,000 apart, then just the
Yeah.
understanding of knowing that maybe they need to rethink what they're looking for in today's current market. Who knows, in a month where things are going to be. But currently I can only speak to what I know. And right now I know material prices are here, and labor is here. And so trying to fit into a budget is sometimes difficult, but by knowing exactly what you're willing or have to spend, is a big help.
Something that you brought up when we were talking in the conference room that is not like entirely clear to me. I mean, it could be like pretty self-explanatory, but for people who don't know, I heard you talking about like multi-generational homes.
Mhm.
Like, how would you best describe that for people who don't know necessarily how to approach something like that?
Yeah, so multi-generational housing it's not a new concept, but basically it's just never kind of had a label. Basically, it's the idea that either your grown children or your parents have to move back in with you for whatever reasons. Mostly it's economic reasons. They can no longer afford to live on their own. Also, as far as providing care for elderly parents, stuff like that. So multi-generational housing is kind of planning a house so that it has separate spaces for different family units. And so, like, if you're planning on building a house and you have elderly parents, providing them a space where maybe they have a separate entrance, they have their own kind of casual space where they can come into the family space and they can, babysit children, spend time with the family, but then they can also retreat to their own space. And it gives them a level of dignity as well as comfort. By having their own space, they still feel, independent in a way. But they still have the connection to the family, and the family can keep an eye on them, make sure that they're getting their medications or the care that they need. This can also happen through like additions or renovations. Is a lot of people already have a house and they need to, kind of bring their parents back or kids back or for whatever reason. And so they're doing additions that they're adding on to their house, but being able just thoughtfully thinking through a design where the family's together, but then they can still be separate. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what it is. It's estimated about 22% of families are have some kind of multi-generational situation. So this is actually kind of a sector that I can see growing in the near future. Especially as it is harder for the elderly to kind of afford their own rent prices and everything's going, unless they have a house that's paid off. But if they're rent or anything, not everyone can afford to live in the villages.
Yeah, and
So-
Social Security, I mean,
Right.
like, it's not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a way of providing like housing for the family unit so that they can stay together, live together, share kind of financial responsibilities so that it's not, a huge burden on any one, part of the family.
See, this is something that I find super interesting because it's like a clear example of what the expertise of your contractor or the person that's doing the design for your project comes into play, right? Like, somebody can come in and tell you like, I want this, and that. But if you don't kind of like guide those people and say like, oh, you may also want this,
Right.
and like, if you don't have the right person for the job, you can potentially down the road have to do the additions, all that, as opposed to going with the right person at first, right?
Right. It's forethought and planning.
Yeah.
It's like, if you know that your parents are going to be older and, and so it's a conversation you at least want to have with your parents, that, we're going to plan for this and make sure they're on the same page. Because there's some people, if they're in a good situation, they have their own place and everything like that. There are people that want to remain independent and have their own place. So, but I think it's worth a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, tell us some fun facts about you.
Fun
Get into the
facts.
fun stuff.
Well, something is I used to be a poker dealer for many years while the downturn.
How'd you like that?
How did I like it?
Yeah.
I did like it. I used to be into playing games and playing cards and everything like that. Poker is kind of a unique kind of mental strategic game.
Yeah.
Trying to it's not like gambling where you're trying to get lucky against the house. You're actually trying to outwit your opponents. And so it's unique in that aspect. I've heard certain poker players describe it as mental warfare. But it's it's a good I think it's a good balance of kind of like planning. It's like when you get into a hand, like kind of knowing from either from experience or from who you're in the hand against, like how to handle certain situations. And again, it comes back to being proactive and thinking things through. But I always found it really fascinating how it's a fairly simple game, but you can manipulate it in a way that it becomes very complex.
Yes.
And so it's very interesting. I also used to be part owner of a saltwater aquarium store. in a previous lifetime.
I think I know who sold it to you.
Yes, you do,
Uh-huh.
Mr. Cotton.
Yes, we were talking about that recently, actually,
Yeah,
because he was here in the office and he was telling me that he had that,
yeah,
and I was like, "Oh wow!" And then he was like, "Oh, I sold it to
yeah,
so and so," and I was like, "Oh, I know that guy."
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
cool.
yeah,
Small
he
world.
had a great setup, and I think he was ready to move on from it, and so
Hmm.
we just kind of we struck up a friendship, and then we just got to talking about it, and I made him an offer, he accepted it, and that's how that kind of got started. But yeah,
That's pretty
it
cool.
was a very interesting kind of experience.
Mhm.
I still, like I don't currently have a saltwater aquarium, but I do stop into, like usually like when I'm in Orlando, I'll stop
Mhm.
into like Worldwide Corals or something like that and just kind of look around
Yeah.
and kind of, it's a really interesting thing. It's also, it's very expensive to maintain a quality
Hmm.
aquarium. Um, but yeah, that's
That's pretty cool though. From
yeah,
construction to poker to
yeah.
aquarium and corals back to like
Well,
the main thing.
yeah, I think I think it's a good thing to be curious and
Absolutely.
interested in other things. I consider myself a lifelong learner.
Hmm.
I'm always trying to kind of learn new things and everything because I feel it makes you a more well-rounded individual moving forward. And you never know when that kind of, when you're going to be in a trivia game and
Absolutely.
and some knowledge just becomes invaluable.
Being curious about life in general is one of
100%.
like the best things that I would advise to anybody, because
Right.
I do it for myself also. Like I've been in multiple industries, and if you don't try it, like you will never know. Like you might have been meant to do that in your life. That might have
Right.
been your purpose. That might have been the thing that fills you up,
Yeah.
that you enjoy the most. And if you just get complacent and find that one thing that is safe, that
Hmm.
you're comfortable with, and never go out of that
Right.
box, like you might be missing out a ton of opportunities and a life full of joy by
100%.
not pursuing that. So yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that you brought on poker, because I could talk about poker for hours, but I'm gonna
I
try
know
to
you
limit
can. I
myself.
know you can.
I'm super passionate about poker,
I
as
know.
you know. Um, my take on that is it's just like life, and it's one of like the purest forms of competition.
Hmm.
When you sit at the table, just kind of like boxing, right? Like it doesn't matter who you are. Like it doesn't matter if you're a plumber, a doctor, a lawyer.
Hmm.
Like it's you versus the other person. And it is a simple game, but like there is so many different levels.
Oh
And
yeah.
once you start playing it at like the highest levels, it
Hmm.
becomes so complex, because it does become a leveling war. Like you have to make sure you make the right decisions. It's just like life, in the sense that sometimes in life you can do everything right and
Hmm.
still lose, and you have to be okay with it. And
Hmm.
sometimes you can make mistakes and win occasionally short term, but the whole idea is like making the right decisions no matter what the outcome is long term, and you'll win,
Right.
right?
I'm okay with mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Mistakes, as long as you learn from them and as
Mm-hmm.
long as you don't repeat them.
I agree.
I think mistakes are critical to learning. I think they're critical to having a fulfilling life. Mistakes mean you're trying.
Yes, absolutely. Fell fast. Learn
Yep.
from it and keep going,
Yep.
for sure. All right. Well, I am gonna spring this on you. I don't know if you have one on the top of your head. Normally, I like to ask the guest of the podcast to think of a quote, one of theirs, like their favorite quote, and why. I'll give you a few minutes to think about it, and we can go and touch into something else, like finishing up here. But until you think about it, if there are people here locally or like in the areas that you serve, you can tell us the areas that you serve, and you can work with them.
Hmm.
How can they find you? Where can they look up your company? What's the best way to reach you?
Well, I mean, I build in Marion, Alachua, and the surrounding counties,
Hmm.
so kind of north central Florida. I'm on Facebook, Stanchek Design Build. Um, Also Instagram,
Hmm.
Stanchek Design Build on Instagram. I don't do TikTok.
We'll get you on TikTok soon enough.
I think I have a TikTok account, but I don't do. I think my stepson, helped me set it up and everything like that. But I
Don't
don't
use
do
it.
much with
Mhm.
it. Maybe Media Minds can help me with that. As far as direct contact, My email is john@stancheckdesignbuild, or you can contact me through my website, stancheckdesignbuild.com.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, man. I'm hoping that this is not the last time. I'm going to bring you in here and talk a little bit more about different things. Have you thought of any quote that?
So actually, something we were talking about earlier kind of popped into my head, and um, I'm a huge fan of the show Ted Lasso. I don't know if you've seen it. If you haven't, you're probably the only person that hasn't. But his be curious, not judgmental, kind of speaking to being curious and learning as you go through life. I feel a lot of people kind of are just sitting back and kind of judging what other people are doing. They're missing out on all the fun. Stop judging and get in there and be curious.
Yeah, 1,000% agree with that, man. One thing that I've heard that kind of like relates to that a little bit is like judging. There's nothing good that comes from judging others, right? And like a lot of the times, we as entrepreneurs in our personal lives, just in life in general, humans tend to shy away from doing certain things out of the fear of being judged by others. And like as soon as you realize that you almost never are going to be judged by people that are at the top, by people that are doing better than you, by people that you are, striving to become like those people, you're almost never going to be judged by those people. The people that are going to try to bring you down and stuff are the people that are like not anywhere near where you are aspiring to get to. And so like it shouldn't matter. Like anybody that is going to come from a judgmental place is not the people that you care about what they have to say.
Right.
And so like it was one of the takeaways for me is like, don't ever let those people stop you from the things that you want to do.
Right.
And don't stop doing those things out of fear or being judged. It doesn't matter. Right?
100%.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming here, for sharing those tips and tricks with people that can potentially be in the same industry than you, that might just be starting. This is just the whole concept of this podcast, is bringing people that are willing to share their expertise, their experiences, the things that they have to go through and endure and overcome, right? Because we all go through it at one point or another. Like we're in the same boat. Those boats sometimes are different shapes, sizes, but at the end of the day, we're all on the same boat. And so I think like sharing that with people that might be in smaller boats, so their boats might be sinking. It's something that is really powerful and fulfilling, because you don't know whose life you could have just changed now by just sharing those few things, right? So thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Really appreciate it. And we're going to keep bringing in more and more guests to help you continue crafting your own badass life.